Hello and welcome to French Philosophers React, a philosophical take on the news headlines for today, September 4th, 2024. This is an AI-generated podcast and can make mistakes. Use it for generating possible ideas, but don't rely on it as an authoritative guide to the news or to the details of French philosophy. In the news today story, at least 12 people, including 6 children and a pregnant woman, have died in a Channel tragedy after a crowded boat carrying asylum seekers was ripped open off the coast of France. The incident is believed to have caused the second highest number of fatalities among those attempting to reach the UK since the small boats crisis began. More than 50 people were rescued, including 2 who are in critical condition. The French Interior Minister has called for a new migration treaty between the UK and the EU, while charities have demanded safe routes for asylum seekers from France. The tragedy comes after over 2,000 people seeking asylum arrived in the UK on small boats in the past week, with charities warning that enforcement alone is not the solution to preventing further deaths. So what might French philosophers have to say about this news item? The recent Channel tragedy that claimed the lives of 12 people, including 6 children and a pregnant woman, is a stark reminder of the brutal consequences of a system that renders certain individuals invisible, uncounted, and ungrievable. This commentary will argue that this tragedy is not an isolated incident, but rather a symptom of a deeper logic of exclusion and disposability that underpins the existing migration regime in Europe. Through the lens of Jacques Rancière's work, particularly his concepts of the police and the politics of aesthetics, we can gain a deeper understanding of how this tragedy came to pass. The story highlights the French Interior Minister's call for a new migration treaty between the UK and the EU, which on the surface appears to be a pragmatic solution to prevent further tragedies. However, Rancière's concept of the police in his book Disagreement can help us see through this facade. The police, according to Rancière, is not just an institution, but a logic that governs the distribution of bodies and spaces, deciding who belongs where and who does not. In this context, the proposed migration treaty would merely reinforce the existing police order, further solidifying the borders that separate the counted from the uncounted. Moreover, the story notes that charities have demanded safe routes for asylum seekers from France, which may seem like a reasonable demand. However, Rancière's work on the politics of aesthetics, in his book The Politics of Aesthetics, can help us see how this demand, while well-intentioned, is still trapped within the existing logic of visibility and invisibility. The charity's demand for safe routes assumes that asylum seekers are already visible subjects, deserving of protection and care. But what about those who remain invisible, those whose lives are not deemed worthy of being counted? Rancière's concept of the aesthetics of politics highlights how our perceptions of reality are always filtered through a particular aesthetic regime, which in this case renders certain individuals invisible. Furthermore, the story mentions that over 2,000 people seeking asylum arrived in the UK on small boats in the past week. This statistic is often presented as evidence of the migration crisis, but Rancière's work can help us see it as something more complex. In his book Proletarian Nights, Rancière explores how the working class has always been characterized by its excess, its surplus population that cannot be fully absorbed into the existing economic order. Similarly, the 2,000 people arriving on small boats represent an excess that disrupts the existing migration regime, revealing its inherent contradictions and flaws. The tragedy also highlights the stark inequality between those who have the means to travel safely and those who are forced to take perilous journeys. Rancière's concept of the distribution of the sensible in his book The Distribution of the Sensible can help us understand this inequality as a matter of aesthetics, where certain individuals are rendered sensible or visible while others remain insensible or invisible. The tragedy is not just an accident, but a consequence of a particular aesthetic regime that deems certain lives more valuable than others. In conclusion, the Channel tragedy is not an isolated incident, but a symptom of a deeper logic of exclusion and disposability that underpins the existing migration regime in Europe. Through Rancière's work, we can see how this tragedy came to pass and how it reveals the inherent contradictions and flaws of the existing system. Rather than seeking pragmatic solutions within the existing framework, we need to challenge the underlying aesthetic regime that renders certain individuals invisible and ungrievable. Only then can we begin to build a more just and equitable world where all lives are counted and valued equally. The story highlights the urgent need for a new politics of migration, one that challenges the existing police order and aesthetic regime. This requires not just a rethinking of policies, but a fundamental transformation of our understanding of what it means to be human. As Rancière argues in his book Hatred of Democracy, democracy is not just a system of governance, but an ongoing struggle for equality and visibility. The Channel tragedy serves as a stark reminder that this struggle is far from over, and it requires our collective effort to build a world where all lives are counted, visible, and valued equally. Thank you for listening to today's episode of French Philosophers React. Be sure to come back tomorrow for more reflective takes on the day's news.